8 Cultivos invisibles apilados en tu patio. Cómo ganar $5,000 mes sin que tu HOA se entere. Your HOA manager has never looked past your fence. Your neighbors assume that corner of your yard is just wasted space. The city's zoning records don't even have a category for what's actually back there. And every single month, $5,000 arrives in your account from something so small, so legal, so completely invisible that municipal code enforcement couldn't find it even if they were looking directly at it. Here's what I'm going to reveal by the end of this video. The exact reason why these 8 systems work together in a way that makes each one exponentially more profitable than it would be alone. Stay with me to discover that mechanism, because once you understand it, you'll realize why your neighbor's empty quarter acre is actually leaving money on the table every single day. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now. This channel breaks down one complete backyard income system every single week, and missing even one video means missing an entire framework for generating real monthly income. Drop a comment below too. Tell me, what's the biggest obstacle keeping you from turning your yard into actual revenue? Whether it's space, time, or just not knowing where to start, I want to hear what's stopping you. Wait, this part is important. Before we go further, I need you to know that I've put together a complete guide that walks through the legal architecture behind every single one of these systems, how municipalities actually classify these crops, which ordinances don't apply to them, and the exact language you'd use if someone questioned what you're doing. It's all in the detailed guide available in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. This isn't something you guess at. The guide breaks down the mechanisms and the law separately, so you understand both. Most people think about backyard income as a single system. One crop, one revenue stream. You grow it, you harvest it, you sell it. But that model leaves almost everything on the table. The operators who are actually hitting $5,000 monthly aren't running 8 separate businesses in their backyard. They're running one integrated ecosystem, where the waste from operation number 1 becomes the feedstock for operation number 2. Leftover plant material becomes substrate. Substrate becomes growing medium. Organic byproducts become premium fertilizer. By the time you stack these 8 correctly, your input costs are dropping while your total output is climbing. That's not luck. That's design. The first critical thing to understand is why nothing on this list is classified as livestock. Your HOA's pet restrictions mention chickens. Your city's animal ordinances reference goats. Your county regulations talk about cattle and pigs. Not a single one of these 8 operations falls into those categories. Insects, certain aquatic invertebrates, specialty herbs and mushrooms, game birds under specific designations, mycelium-based systems. The municipal codes were written decades ago, sometimes in the 1970s, by people who couldn't possibly have anticipated the economics of what's happening in suburban backyards right now. That's not a loophole. That's opportunity hiding in plain language. Operation 1 is mealworms. Most people hear that and immediately think they're looking at a reptile food business. That's where the confusion starts. Yes, mealworms feed reptiles. But the real income, the part that most operators don't even pursue, comes from what those mealworms produce in the process. 2 income streams from literally the same physical footprint. Your startup is under $80. You're looking at 5 plastic bins, wheat bran, and some vegetable scraps. Time commitment is minimal. 20 minutes every other day to refresh the bins, harvest the castings, and manage the colony. The income range is $300 to $600 monthly depending on your local market. But here's where the leverage starts. That byproduct material, the frass, is premium organic fertilizer. Gardeners pay $2 to $4 per pound for it. Most mealworm operators are just discarding it. That's the mistake. The second operation leverages exactly what the first one produces. Operation 2 is a small-scale vermiculture system. Worm bins that take your frass output and existing organic waste and convert them into castings that are even more valuable. You're creating a closed-loop nutrient cycle. The investment here is maybe $150 for the bin itself. Your output is castings that sell for $4 to $6 per pound at farmers markets. A single mature bin can generate 50 to 80 pounds monthly. That's $400 to nearly $500 from something that fits under a workbench. These first 2 operations exist for a reason. They're not about maximal profit individually. They're about creating the inputs that make operations 3 through 8 exponentially more valuable. This is the leverage that nobody talks about. System 3 is where things get visible to your wallet. Microgreens. We're talking about seedlings harvested at 10 to 14 days old, packed with concentrated nutrients, and priced like they came from a Michelin kitchen. Income range here runs $400 to $800 monthly from a single 4x8-foot growing space. Startup cost sits around $230. The math is straightforward. A standard microgreens tray produces between 1 and 2 pounds of finished product every 10 to 14 days. Restaurants pay $12 to $18 per pound wholesale. Farmers markets and direct-to-consumer channels pay $22 to $32 per pound. One grower in Vermont reported moving 14 trays per week at an average of $28 per pound. That's $3,900 monthly revenue from 4x8 feet. After expenses for seeds, growing medium, and electricity, she nets $1,800. The hidden advantage is the waste stream. Those root mats and spent growing medium don't go in the trash. They go directly into your worm bins. Your worms consume them, accelerate decomposition, and your castings output increases. Suddenly, your worm operation that was producing 50 pounds of castings monthly is producing 80. That's $240 additional from the exact same bin. The systems are speaking to each other. System 4 moves into territory that most suburban operators have never considered. Shiitake mushrooms. Not the button mushrooms in grocery stores. Gourmet shiitake. They sell for $16 to $28 per pound at farmers markets. A single 4x8-foot fruiting chamber operating year-round produces 120 to 180 pounds annually. That's $1,900 to $5,000 depending on market access and your sale channel. The startup is deceptive. Mushroom cultivation isn't complicated, but it requires patience. You're inoculating logs or compressed straw with mushroom mycelium. Then you wait. 8 to 12 weeks before your first flush. But after that, those same logs or blocks fruit for 2 to 3 years. A grower in Ohio started with 60 inoculated logs in January. By March, she had her first harvest. By month 7, she'd moved 300 pounds through farmers markets and restaurant wholesale. Her annual revenue exceeded $4,000. Her annual cost was under $300. Before we continue, keep this in mind for a second. Most people assume they need acres or greenhouses or expensive equipment to generate real income from their land. The operators I'm showing you are working with materials that cost between $100 and $500 to start. They're operating in spaces most homes already have, under a deck, in a basement corner, in a garden shed. The mechanics, the supply chains, the exact specifications that separate the people making $3,000 monthly from those making nothing, that's what's documented completely in the guide linked in the description. It's a paid resource, but it includes the exact vendor lists these growers use, the specific mushroom species that outperform by region, and the week-by-week timeline for stacking systems without overwhelming yourself. You'll find it pinned. System 5 brings in something that operates on an entirely different economic principle. Saffron. The spice costs between $6,000 and $10,000 per pound wholesale. A single mature saffron plant produces 3 tiny crimson threads, the stigmas, per flower. 1 pound requires approximately 75,000 flowers. That's roughly 12,000 plants. On a half acre, you could grow that. But there's something operators miss about saffron. It doesn't need a half acre. It grows in containers. Pots. A grower in California's Central Valley maintains 3,000 saffron plants in pot clusters across a backyard space. She harvests once yearly in autumn. The dried stigmas she produces generate between $800 and $1,200 annually per 1,000 plants. 3,000 plants means $3,000 of revenue. Seeds cost 30 cents per plant to start. Total investment across soil, pots, and organic matter runs under $500. Break-even happens in the first season. The scale of these numbers stops people. Saffron sounds exotic, untouchable, impossible. It's neither. It's patient agriculture. Boring, actually. Water the pots. Let them sit through winter. Flowers appear. Pick the threads. Dry them. Sell them. Year 2 and beyond, your costs drop because you're replanting from your own stock. This is perennial income. System 6 is where the operation becomes genuinely concealed. Ornamental shrimp farming. Freshwater shrimp species like red cherry shrimp, Amano shrimp, or crystal shrimp sell to aquarium hobbyists for $4 to $10 per individual shrimp. A single 10-gallon tank can sustain 150 healthy shrimp. Breeding is passive. They reproduce without intervention. A grower in Georgia runs 12 tanks in a small utility room. Her shrimp population produces 15 to 20 juvenile shrimp per tank monthly. That's 180 to 240 juveniles monthly across all tanks. At an average sale price of $6 each, she's moving $1,200 in shrimp revenue monthly. Her investment was $400 in equipment. Her ongoing costs are maybe $30 monthly for food and water treatments. This operation is completely silent, completely invisible. No zoning code in America classifies ornamental shrimp as livestock. It's not a farm, it's not agriculture. It's a hobby that generates income. Neighbors see nothing. HOA sees nothing. The math on shrimp becomes even more interesting when you layer in the next system. System 6 is where the waste stream from everything upstream finally finds its highest purpose. Before we continue with the numbers, keep this in mind for a second. Everything I'm showing you operates on a principle that most people never see coming. These 8 systems aren't separate businesses. They're pieces of a single organism. The waste from one tank feeds the insects in another. The frass from those insects fertilizes the next operation. By the time we finish, you're looking at almost zero external input costs, because the entire backyard has become a closed loop. This is where the complete guide comes in. In the description and the pinned comment, you'll find the detailed breakdown of how to connect these systems so they feed each other. It's not just the individual income, it's the architecture that makes the combined income possible. That guide walks through the exact sequence, the timing, and the equipment you need to wire everything together. System 6 is black soldier fly larvae. This is the conversion engine. Black soldier fly larvae consume any organic waste, kitchen scraps, plant matter, even animal manure, and transform it into the most nutrient-dense fertilizer and animal feed protein the market has ever seen. A single bin system costs between $120 and $200 to set up. It takes up roughly 4 square feet of space. Hidden inside a shed or behind a fence, no one ever knows it exists. The larvae themselves sell for $12 to $18 per pound to reptile owners and aquaculture facilities. A single bin produces 3 to 4 pounds of harvestable larvae every 7 to 10 days during warm months. That's $300 to $500 monthly just from the larva sale. But the real income is the fertilizer byproduct. Once the larvae are harvested, what remains in the bin is frass, essentially pre-composted material that's worth more than the larvae themselves. That frass sells for $4 to $6 per pound to organic gardeners and small farms. A single bin produces 5 to 8 pounds of frass weekly. Do the math. That's another $200 to $300 monthly from the same bin, the same space, the same daily effort. One operator in North Carolina runs 5 bins in a covered corner of his backyard. His shaded area is invisible from the street. His monthly income from larvae alone exceeds $1,500. His monthly income from frass exceeds $1,000. His total startup cost was less than $1,000. His monthly operating costs are zero, because he's feeding the bins with kitchen waste from his own house and grass clippings from his yard. System 7 is where the timeline of this entire backyard finally matters. Perennial herbs, oregano, thyme, sage, rosemary, lavender. Plants that come back year after year without replanting. These aren't the microgreens we discussed earlier. These are mature, established plants that produce harvestable yields for a decade or longer. A single mature lavender plant produces between 800 and 1,200 dried stems annually. Dried lavender bundles sell at farmers markets for $12 to $18. A single plant generates $100 to $200 yearly. 10 plants generate $1,000 to $2,000 yearly. But here's where most backyard growers miss the exponential piece. Those same dried stems can be separated and reprocessed. Lavender buds sold separately to tea vendors or craft suppliers command $15 to $25 per pound. A single plant produces 1 to 2 pounds of buds yearly. The leafy stem material, dried and bundled, sells to craft suppliers or dried flower wholesalers for $8 to $12 per pound. One plant produces 2 to 3 pounds of stem material yearly. One mature lavender plant, properly processed, generates between $250 and $350 in total annual income. Expand to 20 plants in a dedicated corner of your backyard. That's $5,000 to $7,000 annually from a footprint smaller than 200 square feet. The setup cost is $50 to $100 per plant, so roughly $1,000 to $2,000 total. Year 2 and beyond, you're harvesting pure profit. The plants don't need much. Lavender especially grows in poor soil, requires minimal water, and produces reliably in most climate zones. Compare this to anything else you could do with 200 square feet of backyard space. Nothing touches the return on investment. Oregano and thyme produce similarly. Sage is even more profitable per plant. Rosemary takes longer to establish, but yields for 15 to 20 years. The common thread is this: perennial herbs are the infrastructure of the entire backyard income system. They're what keeps producing when everything else goes dormant. They're what generates income in winter when the microgreens business slows. They're the permanent asset that builds over time. Now let me connect the dots for you, because this is where the entire system locks into place. You started with mealworms in bins, invisible, cheap to run, generating frass that feeds your soil. Then you layered in mushrooms under shade cloth, then microgreens in a shed, then quail, then the edible insects, then the high-value herbs. 8 systems, each one separate, each one profitable on its own. But together, they're something else entirely. The waste from the mealworms becomes fertilizer for the lavender. The spent substrate from the mushrooms becomes mulch for the herb beds. The quail droppings go into compost that feeds everything else. The microgreens water runoff hydrates the perennial herbs. Every output from one system becomes an input for another. Your costs compound downward. Your yields compound upward. By month 6, you're not buying fertilizer anymore. By month 9, you're not buying compost. By month 12, you're producing at near zero marginal cost, while your monthly income sits between $4,500 and $5,800. That's the secret I promised you at the beginning. Not that any single system makes good money. You already knew that. The secret is that these 8 systems don't just coexist. They integrate. They feed each other. They create what looks like a chaotic backyard garden to anyone walking past, but what's actually a closed-loop, self-sustaining production ecosystem that generates $5,000 a month while requiring less than 2 hours of total daily labor. Nothing on this list violates zoning codes because nothing is classified as livestock. Nothing is visible from the street. Nothing requires permits. Your HOA doesn't know it exists. Your city doesn't care. Your neighbors have no idea they're living next to a $5,000 a month business. The real question isn't whether you can do this. The real question is what you do with the time and money you get back. Most people who run these systems use the income to fund other ventures. Some use it to pay down debt. Some just let it sit and compound. The point is, your backyard isn't just growing food anymore. It's working for you while you sleep, while you're at your day job, while you're living your normal life. Start small if you need to. Pick 1 or 2 systems, get them profitable, then layer in the next ones. By the time you've been running this for a year, you'll have a system that's nearly impossible to replicate in your specific microclimate and soil. That becomes your moat. That becomes your competitive advantage. That's how you build something that actually lasts. Your assignment this week is simple. Pick the one system from these 8 that excites you most. Just one. Don't try to do everything at once. Spend 5 days researching it. Find 2 people already running it. Ask them 1 question each. By next week, you'll know whether you're actually ready to start, or whether you need more information. That's the only step that matters right now. Thank you for watching this far. If this system makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next deep dive. Hit the like button, activate the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Build something real.